Howdy folks, Doc here with a continuation of our toolbox tour. This is the plier drawer. These are more the standard go-to pliers. I have another drawer down here that's got the larger pliers, Knipex, channel lock type, some specialties. We'll get to that one later, but for now let's take a look at a few particular ones in this drawer. Starting out over on this end, I've got a couple of pairs of Snap-on Linemans, and this is one of my favorites. This is their small lineman. They make a larger version, which is more the standard size. This smaller one, though, is exceedingly handy. It doesn't stress out your hand as much. It doesn't weigh near as much, but it's still got just tremendous gripping and cutting. So it's a kind of a go-to for me if I think I'm going to be needing something of this size. Of course, the larger linemans are always great. And something kind of interesting I've noticed about Snap-on linemans, if you look how far they open up compared to, say, even this one, this opens quite a ways. This is a Klein Journeyman series, but look at that. I'm not sure what the benefit is from opening up that wide. You can't really do a whole lot with jaws that big, but Klein's excellent pliers, Snap-ons open up further. So just an observation there. Even this one opens up quite a ways. Not as much as that one, but for a small plier, pretty incredible. So the smaller Snap-on lineman is definitely something to look at. I'm pretty quick to grab these, even over the larger ones. Next, well, might as well jump ahead to these Talon grip, kind of in modified needle nose. I use these for about everything. They come in different sizes, and the different sizes are basically, as they go smaller, they're kind of amplifying the power of this Talon grip design. If you look at something else like a traditional needle nose, it doesn't have much torsional rigidity, which means the moment you start twisting it, these start splaying apart. You can even see that here a little bit. They start to slide, and this is a good Snap-on one. It's an older one. However, the Talon grip is even stronger than, you know, the classic shape. But the smaller you go, the greater importance that torsional rigidity is, because some of the very small pliers, they just spring apart because there just is not much metal out at the blade tip like that. And this particular one and this one, I really notice how much stronger these are than other small pliers, especially when you're kind of working with beefier electronic stuff that you need to grab and have a pretty good grip on. The Snap-on, or actually almost any of the companies, may produce ones with or without cutting teeth on it, the cutting knives. And part of the reason is that if you get your finger in there because you're doing some precise work, this will lop off a pretty good chunk of skin rather than just give you a crunch and a blood blister. And then they don't put knives on the smaller ones, probably for that reason, because it's so easy to get some skin inside the cutting teeth. This is a really small electronics one. This is spring-loaded. I don't mind that at all on these. And it has a stabilizing pin in it that does give a little bit of added torsional rigidity without necessarily getting in the way of the teeth. Something I do with my spring-loaded pliers is I find some way to keep them closed. And a lot of them I'll find a cap. These are bolt covers, just to keep the end of the bolt from scratching something or being damaged, the threads. And I get these for whatever size and then just drop it over the tip. Another thing you could do is if you have an inner tube, an old inner tube, is just use this, kind of make your own rubber bands, just like that. And then this just slips right over the handles and then keeps it from opening up. So you can make those for any size you want. And I've got inner tubes, large, fat bike to motorcycle inner tubes, and then smaller kind of standard ones. So I can cut the rubber bandish type closers for about anything. This is another one. that is spring-loaded, and I don't mind when there's some automatic locking or some locking mechanism on it. So I'll get back to this one in a sec. So keep them closed. It protects the blades, keeps you from cutting yourself or damaging tips on the small, fine ones. The standard slip joint, Snap-on's improved on that design by providing a triple joint. Means you can get a small plier that grabs way over its pay grade, or you can get some of these, like this guy here. This is their monster plier, that you can get a couple inches of grab there. I really like this plier. Although it's huge, it's not terribly heavy, but the precision in the jaws is such that I can use it for some finer work if that's all I've got. But it's really hard to, say, use a small plier like this, you know, for a big job. So I tend to err on the side of the larger pliers. And speaking of when you're scaling things up, here's a couple of needle nose. There are two ways you can make things longer here. You can make longer jaws or longer handles. So it isn't just the length when you're thinking about buying a longer pair of needle nose, but also where the pivot point is in relation to the jaws and the handles. Ones like this has just tremendous leverage, you know, because I've got basically, looks like about 5 times as much handle as I do grabbing, whereas here I probably maybe 3, maybe even 2. If I look at this, it divides it into thirds. So I might have, you know, twice the strength here versus 5 times the strength, or in this case 4 times the strength, I guess. But if you go out too far, you start to get some a lot more leverage out here than what the plier can actually handle. So it's very easy to separate tips or bend things. This is an old Snap-on, and it's not the greatest design. I mean, it's a very nice, beautiful, silky, smooth plier, especially for its age. However, they included, excuse me, a kind of a gripping surface in here that you'd be tempted to grab a bolt with. And the problem with doing that is the pliers are not strong enough for that kind of work. And if you look at the radius here, or the kind of the curve of it, you're thinking you're probably going to be grabbing something at about that size, you know, size of my finger, and you know, wailing on it. So by putting that on, you're inviting misuse of the plier. I have not seen that again. You know, I've seen a lot of other things included in some needle nose, but not a big gripping surface like that on such a narrow profile plier. And going into kind of the multi or combination ones, Klein has been playing around with different designs where they include multiple tools within one plier format. And this is I think their biggest multi-tool right now. It's essentially got like a lineman tip on it. And that lineman tip actually is fairly powerful, and they've put the substance into the metal so you can actually use that tip. But they've also then got wire strippers, some common sizes. They've got a big set of cutting knives here, you know, considering the size of the plier. In fact, if you compare it, you know, to some dedicated cutters, you know, it's actually a little bit bigger than this pair of Snap-ons as far as the cutting teeth. Then it goes into some bolt cutters and a crimper. Pretty good solid handle. They're using a harder plastic here, so it's not quite the grippiness of the Snap-on. But one thing I'll point out is a lot of the pliers have symmetrical handles, and our hands are asymmetrical. So, you know, this one here, I guess with the curve on it, does fit and operate quite well into the human hand. Sometimes people, you know, are saying it might work better left or right. This one you can just flip it over. These are a little bit oriented as far as the cutting and watching, you know, what you're cutting. However, the reason I point that out is a lot of times the pliers don't fit into the hand very well because they've taken a standard design. Maybe this was the maybe this was the original size, and then this one they scaled up, and this one they scaled down, and they use maybe the same form factor. These are a little bit more curved, you can see there, so they put some effort into that. But a lot of times they'll just make them bigger or smaller, but the hand is still the same size. So I like it when the plier manufacturers start exploring different shapes, and some of them are just utter disasters, and others are fabulous. They just feel great in the hand. I mean, these are wonderful, and the reason is if you look at the amount of contact that's there, whereas other kinds of pliers that I'll get to don't contact, they just bounce off of one particular point. You can't wrap your hand around it. This is another combination Klein here. They've moved the wire stripper inside. That's allows you to pull on it with the pivot helping you rather than having to keep the pliers closed. This you can grab the entire plier and then strip if you had to. And what I like about this particular one is they've moved the cutting knives right up out to the tip. And by putting them out in the tip, you can actually get right up against something and nip it off like a zip tie or something if you've got a bundle of wire, or you want to cut a wire really close rather than having to wedge it way down inside all the way towards the pivot to get a good cut. Mention this one. This is the high leverage. This is my go-to if I've got to hold something still, say on a grinding wheel or a belt sander. Super strong, and it has all of the kind of the traditional plier capabilities except for a wide jaw. So I can hold something much stronger or much tighter with this particular plier than I can with this particular one. So having something like that can make a pretty good difference if you're using pliers, although again, kind of like the this needle nose with the gripper, you might have the wrong tool if you're trying to work with nuts and bolts with a pair of slip joint pliers. Snap-on does, this is their Talon grip, but then here's a Klein shaped tip, and here's another that you can see are fairly stout. So this is a really beefy pair of needle nose pliers, tremendous strength. I think this is in maybe their Journeyman series, but this particular one, I just zero flex, really strong, and it still goes out to a fairly fine tip. So there's a lot of metal there. This is their combination one. It does have a little bit narrower beak on it, but they've also thrown on a whole bunch of wire stripping options and cutters and bolt cutters there. Again, spring loaded. This is a real handy plier that does give you the strength of kind of a beefy needle nose. But a lot of times if you're using a needle nose, it isn't that beefiness you really need. It's the precision. But it's nice that it's not going to break off like the others, like the finer ones. Again, these come in really handy, no cutters, but the jaws being short with the pivot right here, high leverage, so you really do need kind of a stronger metal out there. This is a kind of a fun one. You've probably seen these. This is sometimes called a battery plier. This is an old school snap-on, if you can read that. But what I think is kind of cool about this is it's a slip joint. So I can grab larger things, with parallel jaws, larger bolts. And Snap-on doesn't make this slip joint anymore, but I really think it's a great idea. In fact, I've told Snap-on I would love to see a slip joint Talon grip needle nose. And you're thinking, well, why? You don't really need to grab something huge. Well, actually you do, and sometimes with precision. So if I wanted to grab something round that was larger and a little thin ring, it would be great if I could open these up so they grabbed, with that kind of precision further out. So I could grab something with larger diameter. I don't know, we'll see. But anyway, they discontinued these a long time ago. It's the old vacuum grip, they called it. Kind of looks like an octopus tentacle or something. But it was it's a plier that's no longer made. They make one similar that just doesn't have that slip joint. As far as cutters go, you know, there's the standard. This is a classic design here, but there are a lot of others. Knipex makes kind of these mini bolt cutters. Excellent cutting knives on these. I had a pair that were similar that were snap-on and actually dinged them up pretty bad. This particular one, and bring out another. These two have an advantage in that you might notice the tips actually can form little circles. And those circles, or those ovals, basically encapsulate, say if you've got a bundle of cable, or wires, it encapsulates it and then cuts it. So as it's cutting down, it's holding it in a bundle. Whereas if you try to do it with a standard set of cutters, say like this, as soon as you start closing it, you can see that this is forming a triangle here. And that triangle means it's forcing the wires up. So as I start squishing, it's going to start kind of smearing the bundle of wires. And then it's going to cut it at an angle or not at all sometimes. Whereas these, not these, where'd they go? Here they are. Any of these, as soon as you start cutting, it forms a circle and then basically closes in until it snips it off through the center. So ones like these are important to have if you're ever cutting, you know, fine cable. I use them a lot. I do a lot of bicycle repairs and any bike cable. Same thing. Or cutting the housing that might have a plastic coating around a metal spool or a ring, and you've got to somehow keep it together. Otherwise, you smash it flat and then slice off an edge. So things like that are important. Here's another pair. This one, or this is the Wiss. I guess I showed you this one. Does it in both kind of a small, like very fine hole up there, a little bit larger here. Here's a Klein. This one is designed for smaller wire or cable. Plus it's got nice nippers on the end. This is a great pair of pliers. Love this thing, these Kleins. These are flush cuts. This particular one is a Klein, very small, and I just got these. This is the snap-on release, their little cap here, the snap-on version. And these are just dynamite. I'm thrilled with these things. They're on the pricey side, but when I looked at getting a nicer, larger pair of flush cuts, I was up into the $30, $40 pretty quick. So making the leap, you know, to Snap-on, it still hurt, but I'm thrilled with them now. And they are just so nice, super flat, total flush cut, truly a flush cut. Anyway, a couple of others. The bent nose come in handy. If you need any kind of a reach like that, but these are really not very strong. So if you're ever trying to apply some pressure, in fact, again, I can kind of feel the pliers bending and I'm pinching my finger with them. But they do come in handy, but they also don't work very well for an awful lot of things, so you have to have a need for them before you start using those. Anyway, those are the main pliers that I've got. I will say that I'm really kind of a stickler of handles, and I'm sort of disappointed that a lot of plier manufacturers aren't exploring more handle designs. I mean, I really want pliers when I want pliers. This is a Leatherman, and a lot of people carry these around, and I see them used even by mechanics, and I'm thinking, the Leatherman actually designs the handles to contain other tools and, you know, to kind of cover up the plier as needed, you know, and still make a nice, useful, you know, knife or something. But the problem is it's not really designed to optimize the human hand plier handle interface. So a lot of times, instead of a Leatherman, I'll have a knife and I'll have a pair of pliers. And that's what I want. If I want pliers, I want pliers. I don't want pliers attached to something else. So I kind of get this is really handy, but you know, I've helped out friends, you know, working on their cars, and this is their pair of pliers. And I'd much rather have a good pair of pliers that's designed to fit in the hand, designed to work as pliers with the human hand interface. But scaling things up and down, I wish they would explore a little bit more rather than just saying, you know, if you're going to make something small or make something big, that's all you do. Just like, you know, multiply the number of every dimension by a value, twice as big, 3 times as big. Because a lot of times it isn't just the size we want, it's the operation, and the hand isn't changing size. Same with, I mentioned in my screwdriver handle video. But anyway, those are the pliers. I am always keeping my eye out for different pliers, which tells me I'm a little frustrated maybe with some of the designs, but I'm thrilled with the ones that I showed you and would have no hesitation getting those again if I lost them. And got any questions or anything, post them in the comment section. Doc out.